Yes, guys, welcome back to the Premier League Appetiser show. I'm Coach Indy. You're watching the Asian One-to-One Football Coaching channel. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please do so now. One click, 1 second, and it's done. You'll get all notifications come through every time there's a video uploaded to the channel. Go and do that now before we dive into the rest of the episode. Okay, on today's episode, we're going to be talking about the Premier League fixtures. The Premier League is back, so we'll be talking about those. Some of the fixtures, some of the head-to-heads with managers, players, new players that have come into the teams. Then we'll talk about transfers that have been made over the last week or so, and then also some rumours, things that could materialise over the next week or two. We'll discuss that as well. There's also been some law changes that have happened since the end of 1920 season going into 2021 season, so we'll briefly touch on that. Then we've got a new segment called Indy versus the rest of the world. Essentially, it's predicting the games every weekend, but I'll be against someone new every week. So we'll dive into that a little bit later on, and then we'll finish off with some other news that's been happening in the football world as well. So without further ado, we'll get stuck into the Premier League fixtures. So I'll run through the fixtures first, and then we'll tackle a few of the games as well, what I think might be interesting sort of head-to-heads and interesting games just in general. So Fulham versus Arsenal's early kick-off on the Saturday. Crystal Palace versus Southampton is the 3 o'clock game. Liverpool versus Leeds, so the champions of the Premier League versus champions of Championship. Champions of Championship, yeah, that makes sense. That's at 5:30, and then the 8 o'clock kick-off on the Saturday night, if you're in England, is West Ham versus Newcastle. They're moving into Sunday. You've got 2 games on the Sunday. You've got West Brom, another of the newly promoted teams, versus Leicester City. And you've got Tottenham versus Everton, which is a 4:30 kick-off on the Sunday. Then there's 2 games on the Monday, which is Sheffield United versus Wolves. Both those teams had really good seasons last season. And then Brighton versus Chelsea. So that kind of rounds off the first round of fixtures. I will just note that there is a couple of postponements because of Manchester United and Manchester City's European commitments from last season. So their respective opponents, so Burnley versus Manchester United, that's been postponed, and also Manchester City versus Aston Villa, that's also been postponed. So those 2 fixtures will get filtered in at some point throughout the season. So effectively only 8 games this round. Okay, so Fulham versus Arsenal. So you've got 2 relatively new managers, Scott Parker versus Mikel Arteta. Scott Parker's got the fraction more experience, should I say. Having said that, he's not got much experience in the Premier League. Arteta's got less experience in managing, but he's got more experience in the Premier League. So they're your managers. And in terms of sort of personnel and maybe head-to-head, so Arsenal seem to have made quite a few signings. They'll probably have a few players that will be starting the game, lots of Willian, maybe Gabriel, the centre-half. So maybe those 2 will start. Coupled with, obviously, Aubameyang, who's their main threat, their best player. And then alongside maybe a couple of youngsters as well, with maybe Saka, maybe Nketiah as well. And Arsenal obviously been in decent form from last season and showed promising signs going into this season. So they're looking in good shape. Fulham on the other hand, they've got Mitrovic up front, who was their striker 2 years ago when they were in the Premier League. Scored plenty of goals, scored loads of goals in the Championship last season. So I expect him to do that again this season, provided obviously he's fit. And they're a relatively new squad. I mean, you've got Brian at left back, who's not a new player at the club, but he's a new player in the Premier League. You've got Tom Kenny, he's actually had some experience in the Premier League. I think he's the captain of the club in the centre of the park, along with I don't know. I'll tell you what, guys, at that moment there, leave a comment. Who is Tom Kearney's centre midfield partner? Now, I know there could be a few options, but who's predominantly his midfield partner? And if there's just one player, leave it in the comments. If there's 2 players, again, leave it in the comments right now. Moving on to Crystal Palace versus Southampton. Roy Hodgson, Ralph Hasenhüttl, 2 managers. Both, well, certainly in Roy Hodgson's case, very, very experienced. I believe he's the oldest manager in Premier League history. And Ralph Hasenhüttl, who maybe the decision to bring him in a couple of years ago wasn't the greatest, but he's certainly shown signs of progression, certainly in the second half of the season. And then in terms of some of the players, you've got young Eze, who was signed from QPR has gone to Crystal Palace, a young player in the Championship, did quite well, very tricky, very dynamic, very exciting type winger. And alongside you could have Zaha there, you could have, well they've just signed Michy Batshuayi on loan as well, so that could be potentially a very good strike force. And then you got the likes of, on the Southampton side of things, you've got Danny Ings, who was an absolute gunman last year, and I probably expect him to do something similar this season. Maybe not quite reach 22, but he won't have a bleak season where he just scores like 7. I can't see that personally, providing he's fully fit for the whole season. Ward-Prowse, now the new captain, unbelievable player, underrated player in my opinion. And then you've got goalkeeper McCarthy, you've got Kyle Walker-Peters they've signed as well. So that for me, that seems like a very even game. Maybe leaning towards Palace just because just at home, and whether that's an advantage or not, I don't know, with 0 fans in the ground. So obviously waiting to see on that one. Then moving on to probably the big game on the Saturday, which is Liverpool versus Leeds. You've got Klopp versus Bielsa, two very, very experienced managers. Bielsa's not managed in the Premier League as of yet, but he's got loads and loads of experience. So I did touch on that in the last episode. So guys, go and watch the last episode. I'll put a link in the description as well. I talk about Bielsa at length and all the other promoted managers as well. And obviously you've got Klopp, who's on this just wave of just winning tournaments and trophies, you know, Premier Leagues, Champions Leagues, FIFA World Club Championship, you know, you name it, he's winning at the moment. So they're really, really in a strong and healthy position. So yeah, this will be a very, very interesting game. Two teams that are very energetic, want to play a second style of football, want to be in your face. So I suspect Liverpool will win the game. 1, because they're at home. 2, because they're the champions and they don't want to get off to a losing start or drop points. But also, if it's just both teams playing a very similar way, Liverpool have got the better players, so you'd lean towards them taking their chances or being better in the defensive third as well. So very, very exciting game to watch on the opening day of the season. In the late game, you've got West Ham versus Newcastle. To me, this seems like a very even game on paper. Granted, football isn't played on paper, but you've got West Ham, who have shown a really, really good form back end of last season. Granted, this is a new season, so form kind of does go out the window, but if they can somehow just sort of get them feelings back towards the end of last season and build some early momentum, they could do some things, especially with Antonio and Jared Bowen and players like that who can affect the game in an attacking sense. Then Newcastle, who we'll touch on them a bit more in terms of transfers in and out, but they've made a load of signings, especially just this week, alongside obviously what they had which last season, which was a sort of stable core of players that will kind of know what it takes to play for Newcastle in the Premier League. So we won't touch on Newcastle too much, but I can probably see that being a draw possibly in that game. Moving on to the Sunday's games then. So you've got West Brom versus Leicester. A promoted team in West Brom, manager Slaven Bilic. Leicester City, Brendan Rodgers as a manager. Both relatively experienced in terms of managing in the Premier League and having Premier League experience. Obviously, we'll touch on Leicester to start with. The likes of Maddison and Harvey Barnes and Vardy, they've got a lot of attacking threats going forward. Defensively, they have got a few players missing early on, so Pereira's injured, he'll be out for a little while still. Johnny Evans is suspended for the first 3 games, and then they've sold Ben Chilwell. So there is, 3 of the back 5, if you like, that core group of players that help Leicester, get into second/third in their sort of the first 2/3 of the season. They're missing. So there is opportunities for West Brom to get at them, and this might be a good time to actually play Leicester because, like I said, they're kind of maybe vulnerable defensively. And then the young lad who West Brom have signed, Pereira, he excites me from what I've seen. I've only seen YouTube clips, guys, so granted everyone looks good on YouTube. But if he can affect the game in a positive way, he could cause some damage for Leicester. So that'd be an interesting game, and possibly a draw in that game. I won't predict too much, guys. I'll give you the correct scorelines as we go along in the later segment. Then you've got the 4:30 game, which is Spurs versus Everton. Mourinho versus Ancelotti, 2 heavyweights in terms of the managers and in terms of what they've won and the pedigree they've got. Not just in the Premier League, but in world football. They've both been around the continent and especially in Europe, and winning things, trophies after trophies. So both of them have got a point to prove. Both clubs have got points to prove. Both teams have made some really, really clever signings, some acute signings, some ambitious signings as well. Just to touch on Spurs, Højbjerg, Joe Hart, who will be a backup to Lloris, but put pressure on him, and then Doherty as well. And Everton this week, which again I'll touch on a little bit later on, Doucouré, James Rodriguez, Allen, to go along with the players they've already got with Andre Gomez and Richarlison and DCL, all these types of players. So that will be a very, very good way to sort of finish the weekend and then lead into sort of Monday. So Sheffield United versus Wolves is the 6 o'clock kickoff on the Monday night. I touched on this earlier. Both teams, certainly Sheffield United, overachieved last season. You can maybe argue with Wolves as well as a whole campaign, not just as in the league campaign, in terms of what they did in Europe and in other cup competitions as well. This will be a really interesting really interesting game actually, just to see where both teams are from a psychological point of view, physical point of view, and also from a tactical point of view as well, because these two teams both play three at the back. So interesting to see two teams straight away, who can adapt against the other formation, because they do play slightly different. But yeah, that'd be an interesting game. And then you've got the last game of the first round of the fixtures, which is Brighton versus Chelsea. Brighton have a fully fit squad, as I've just heard on Sky, and obviously Chelsea have got ample new signings sort of come in. So you've got Graham Potter, a young British manager. Well, I say young, he's a British manager who's inexperienced in the Premier League. He's had one season there, and English football in general, versus Frank Lampard, who has a season in the Premier League, a season in the Championship. So that'll be an interesting game. I suspect Chelsea's class will shine through and win them the game. But it'll be a very, very interesting game. So yeah, they're the fixtures, guys. Rather than just sort of commenting about the Tom Kenny situation, which I've asked you guys to do, just fill in what do you think the predictions could be as well. It doesn't have to be every single game, maybe just one game in particular you think, wow, that could be that scoreline, or even if it's just a player you think, Timo Werner, think he might score a brace. Pop it in the comments. We'll have a look at them. We'll give you a shout out next time if you get a correct one right. So they're the games, and then obviously we'll go on to we'll touch on those next week after game week 1 has finished. Right, we'll move on to transfers in and rumours. So we'll start with the transfers in to start with. So I touched on Everton and a bunch of other clubs that have made loads of signings, but we'll start on Everton. They've signed the Brazilian midfielder Allen from Napoli for 21.7 million. I haven't seen too much of him play. I've only heard that he's a very energetic type player. He likes to rattle around the pitch, just likes to get in people's faces, quite aggressive. But when he does win the ball, he plays quite simple. It reminds me a little bit of Kante, if you want to compare those. Or even if you want to make a better comparison, maybe Idris Guy, who used to play for Everton. Obviously he went to PSG, so maybe they were looking for a replacement in terms of him, although albeit a couple of years later. And they also signed James Rodriguez. Now this is a hell of a signing, to be honest with you. The name James Rodriguez, what he did in the World Cup, what he did for Colombia, what he's done for other clubs that he's been around, i.e. Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. For Everton to get this sort of calibre of player, this stature of player, and this reputation of a player is a brilliant, brilliant signing. So he's signed for Everton on a 3-year deal for £21 million. Interested to see where he plays. My suspicion will be that he'll play probably on the right hand side of a 4 in midfield. And the final one they've made is Doucouré, signed from Watford, central midfielder, for £20 million. So he could be one that could play straight away in centre midfield with Allen. So it could be just those two bang straight in the team. So they could almost have a brand new midfield. If they play forward midfield and those three all start, it just leaves a position available on the left hand side. So they've made some waves, they've made some noises, especially this week, and good timing as well, obviously leading into this first game. This is why I think the Everton fixture against Spurs will be a really, really fascinating game. Intriguing game, not only from a tactical point of view, but just from an entertainment point of view as well. Just whiz through the other signings as well. Wolves have made a few signings, so they've signed a left back called Marcel from Lyon for £2 million. They also have signed something else. Have they signed someone else? No, they have not. That was last week. Other signings, so Sheffield United have made a few other signings as well. Not outlandish signings, not big names or anything like that, but they've signed Maxlow and Bogle, who are, I believe they're two wing backs that played for Derby last season. So maybe they're just adding competition in that area to put pressure on the two wing backs, Edna Stevens and whoever plays on the right side for Sheffield United. And they've also signed Ampadu, the lad from Chelsea, centre half, signed him on a loan for the season as well. Again, probably to put a bit of pressure on some of the centre halves they've already got. Then Newcastle, so they've made some other signings as well. They've signed Ryan Fraser, the lad who used to play for Bournemouth. They've signed him on a free. That's a really, really good signing actually. Exciting winger, tricky winger as well. I've also signed Callum Wilson from Bournemouth as well for £20 million. Obviously, he's relatively proven in the Premier League. He's played in the Premier League for the last 5 seasons, scored maybe 10 goals every season. So I would say that's proven in the Premier League. And they also signed Jamal Lewis from Norwich City, the young, exciting fullback, or one of the two young, exciting fullbacks that played for Norwich last season. Signed him for £15 million as well. So maybe Jamal Lewis might not be a first team initially straight away, but the type of character he is and the way he speaks and understands the game, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the team very, very, 3 or 4 or 5 games into the season, he's automatically sort of, a first team if you like. So they've made 3 signings, and that's why I didn't want to touch on Newcastle earlier on too much, because I think they could be really, really exciting, especially going forward. If you've got Callum Wilson spearheading that attack, and you've got Fraser, you've got Alan St-Maximin, and you've got the young lad Almiron as well. Those 3 behind Callum Wilson, that's a very exciting, very pacey, very energetic front 4. So that excites me about Newcastle. I'm not saying all these are going to play together. They, it might be that only one of them start in the wide position. Maybe only Fraser starts and St-Maximin doesn't, or vice versa, or Almiron doesn't start. But certainly on paper, those 4 they look really, really exciting. So yes, there's some other signs that have been made. There's 2 others to finish with. Aston Villa have signed Ollie Watkins. So he's a striker that played for Brentford last season, scored 26 goals in all comps. Narrowly missed out on promotion with Brentford. So he's been reunited with Dean Smith. So just if you guys aren't in the loop or not, I'm not sure if you are. But Dean Smith used to be the manager of Brentford. He actually signed Ollie Watkins when he was a manager sort of 3 or 4 years ago. And like I said, now they've been reunited. They've actually signed him for an initial fee of £28 million, rising to £33 million, which is a big chunk of money, especially for a player that's not proven in the Premier League and a player that's only played at the Championship level. But that's how much Dean Smith and Aston Villa believe in the player, and also is how much Brentford rate the player as well. And the last one I want to talk about is Fulham have signed Aurelio, which is a goalkeeper from PSG on loan for the season. So that's obviously going to thicken up their goalkeeping competition as well. In terms of some of the rumours, some of these obviously spoke about in previous weeks as well before, guys. So Sancho and Thiago Silva, the two, Thiago Alcantara, should I say. Those 2 are still sort of rumoured about, whether anything materialises. Just to touch on, Thiago linked with mainly Liverpool, but also Man United. And Sancho heavily linked with Manchester United. Whether they materialise, I'm not sure. And then 3 that sort of materialised, 2 certainly materialised this week, and then 1 that sort of back end of last week. So 1 that happened back end of last week, Gini Wijnaldum has been linked with Barcelona. Whether Liverpool fans would be happy to get rid of him, I'm not sure. They might say if he goes and we get Thiago, they'll probably be quite happy with that. But then it changes the dynamic of the midfield and the structure of their team. So he's been linked to Barcelona, and obviously Ronald Koeman used to be the Holland manager, and he played Wijnaldum all the time. So that's sort of where the link comes from. So watch your space for that one. And then 2 others. There's a young lad called Eduardo Mendy. He's a goalkeeper that plays for Rennes in the French league. He's been linked heavily with Chelsea. Some sources are actually saying that he's actually agreed a deal already, but I've not seen anything concrete just yet. We're rumoured to be around £20 million. So maybe that'll be the one that maybe we talk about next week. That might have been completed and the deal will be done. And the other one that's the interesting one that's sort of noticed the last couple of days is young Tomori at Chelsea, the centre half, who played under Frank Lampard and Jody Morris on loan from Chelsea at Derby 2 years ago. In the Championship, actually won Player of the Season. For Derby that season. Got a relatively good amount of games last season for Chelsea, but obviously still needs experience at the highest level and maybe not the pressure at Chelsea immediately. So he's been linked to go to Everton on loan for the season. Obviously Chelsea have signed Thiago Silva, and they've got Rudiger, and they've got Christensen, they've got Zuma. So they've got lots of players in that position. So it's difficult for him to get game time. So yeah, another one to sort of watch his space with young Tomori. Moving on to the law changes then. Okay, so law changes, there's been sort of three main ones that have sort of changed, two quite obvious ones and one that sort of involves VAR, if you like, and they're the ones that sort of maybe fans will be most frustrated with. So two obvious ones that kind of make sense from what happened from Project Restart. First one being that the substitution rule and the matchday squad rule has gone back to what it was before Project Restart. So just to refresh your minds, when Project Restart happened, the allocation of subs increased to 5 and the matchday squad increased from 18 to 20. So that's now being reduced back down to the normal quantity. So 18 matchday squad and then 3 substitutions. Second thing that's changed is there will be no more drinks breaks. I personally, this is my viewpoint, I would like them to continue until maybe the first international break. It's only 3 games, but you've got teams that are joining the season at different stages. I just feel like maybe it just benefit everyone when you get to that stage, because then everyone would have had minutes in their legs, and at that point there everyone should be relatively sharp, and then at that point there it's almost like everyone's kind of at an even stage, if you like, almost. So I would like the drinks break to continue for maybe up until the next international break, and then at that point there stop it. Not because it's too hot. That was the reason why the drinks break was brought in, for a number of reasons, but that was one of the reasons, because Premier League football's never been played during the summer in England, and it doesn't get overly hot over here, but it can get hot. If you have hot spells, it can be difficult for the players if they're not used to it. But also the drinks rule was brought in also to sort of allow the players to, because they've not had any games and stuff, so it's just to sort of break down the game a little bit, to sort of recharge and rehydrate and all that kind of thing. But obviously that's not happening anymore, so that's the second thing. And the next one is sort of some VAR changes that have happened. That's be interesting whether people agree with them or not, I'm not sure. I'll just run through them. So firstly, there'll be heavier reliance on the referee review area, so RRA, which will be consulted to analyse subjective decisions in 3 crucial areas: goals, red cards and penalty kicks. So effectively, the referee review area is where the TV monitor is, so there'll be more reliance or heavier reliance on the referees to go and check out the monitor and make a decision from there, as opposed to not really using that, going to VAR, the video assistant referee, then making the decision and then relaying that back to the on-field referee. So that's something that kind of makes sense. The only thing I was questioning is time, but then having said that, the time it took for VAR, the video assistant referee, to make a decision, then maybe it might not be too much of a difference. So that's one thing. Another thing is there will be a change regarding goalkeeper encroachment on penalty kicks. So should the goalkeeper save a penalty but have his foot over the line, then VAR will have it retaken. If the goalkeeper is found to be off his line with the ball hitting the post, the penalty will not be retaken unless the goalkeeper has a material impact on the kick being missed. That's another thing that's been mentioned. This one kind of happened a little bit last year, but I think they're just reinforcing it. The flag will also be kept down for tight marginal offside offences. When a chance on a goal is about to happen, the assistant referee will be advised to keep their flag down until the players pass. So if you remember last season, rather than a pass being made and say Aguero's making the run, and the flag and the assistant referee thinks Aguero's offside, rather than putting his flag on immediately, he'll delay, especially on the tight ones, he'll delay as long as possible, and then they'll go back to it later on if something major does materialise from it, i.e. a goal or penalty, whatever it may be. So yeah, there's sort of a few things that's sort of happening with the law changes. Most of them are self-explanatory. Can't really disagree with most of those, but I had sort of maybe one sort of minor thing I would sort of tweak if I had a choice. But they're the law changes, guys. We'll move on to the next part of the Premier League Appetiser show, which is a new segment. Basically, it's called Indie versus Rest of the World. It's a predictions segment. So how it's going to work over the course of the season, so 38 game weeks, myself will be against an opponent, whether it be a friend, family member, someone I know that's going to basically predict some scorelines of Premier League fixtures against me. So this week I've asked my brother Gerpel to come up against me. There's only 8 games, so effectively what's going to happen is it's not going to be just for argument's sake. I score 10 points and Gerp scores 6. That's not 1-0 to me. What's going to happen is that'll be 10 points to Indy and then 6 points to the rest of the world, and there'll be a tally throughout the 38 game weeks, and then to see who has the most points. So it's just a little something different that I'll add to this sort of or to the Premier League Appetiser show. So what we'll do is I'll just run through both our scores. So Gertz has messaged in and left his scores, and I'll run through mine as well. In fact, I'll do mine first. So I've gone for Fulham 1, Arsenal 3, and then Gertz has gone for the same scoreline. So we're both going to pick up. I should have mentioned as well. So if you get the exact score correctly, so in this case, if the Arsenal game does finish 3-1, then both teams will score 5 points. However, if Arsenal win this game 1-0, then both teams would score 2 points. And obviously, if it's a draw or for a loss for Arsenal, then 0 points. So, yeah, should have mentioned the scoring system on that. Next game, so I've gone for Crystal Palace 1, Southampton 1. And Gertz has gone for Palace 0, Southampton 0. So we've both gone for a draw, but a different scoreline. So there's potentially some different points to pick up there. Next game, funny enough, we've actually gone for the same result again, which is I've gone for West Ham 2, Newcastle 2, and Gertz has gone the same. So it's very, very similar in the first 3, and it kind of does change a little bit as we go along. Next game is Liverpool versus Leeds. Now I've gone for a 3-1 win for Liverpool. And Gertz has gone for a 3-0 win. So you've got a marginal difference there. I think Leeds will score. Gertz doesn't think they will. Next game, West Brom versus Leicester. I've gone for a Leicester 3-1 win. Very ambitious, actually, thinking about it. But I do think they'll concede. Gertz has gone for a bit more of a closer game, but he has gone for a Leicester win. He's gone for a 2-1 win for Leicester. Then the last game on the Sunday, I've gone for a 3-1 Spurs win over Everton. Gertz has gone for a 2-1 win. Again, only a goal difference on that one. Next game is Sheffield United versus Wolves. So I've gone for Sheffield United to nick this game 2-1. Can't change my predictions now, guys. This is it. It's locked in. All the information I might be informed of between now and kick-off time. I can't change it. It's locked in. Plus, it's on video camera now, so it's on YouTube. I can't change it. And Gertz has gone for Sheffield United 1, Wolves 1. So we've both gone for a different result there. So the first one, we've both gone for a different result. So that'll be interesting. That game there, I'm going to predict now, that will probably be the decisive. Although it's not head-to-head, that could be the decisive result in terms of who picks up the most points for the week. And then last game is Brighton versus Chelsea. I've gone for Chelsea to have a really, really good game here. I don't know why I have, because I think Brighton are quite good defensively, but nevertheless I've gone with it now. So I've gone for Brighton 1, Chelsea 4. Very, very ambitious, guys, I know. I don't know why I've done that, but again, I've gone with it. And Gertz has gone Brighton 1, Chelsea 3, so a goal sort of difference, if you like. So yeah, there are scores for the first week, and like I said, I'll recap on these next week, and then also have the next lot of predictions as well. Game week 2. Of course, there will be 4 more teams involved. There'll be 2 more games involved as well. So they'll have a full round of fixtures, if you like. So inevitably there will be more points up for grabs later in the season as well. So that's a new segment that I've thought I'd create, so have a bit of fun on the Appetiser show as well. Last thing I just want to touch on is some other news. So a couple of things that have happened. One is the big announcement that I sort of saw this week was how the Premier League announces the fixtures, the ones that are going to be broadcasted and the kick-off times. Obviously, they're organised before the broadcasters, Sky, BT, Amazon, whatever it may be, BBC. They organise X amount of games to be on television, and then the rest of the games obviously won't be on TV. They'll just be on certain slot times, normally 3 o'clock on a Saturday. So there was 11 games announced. I think about 2.5-3 weeks ago. That 11 games will be televised over the period of September. So scattered over sort of 3 weeks, if you like, on various broadcast channels. On the back of that, the government have urged the Premier League to reconsider and to have more games televised, so the fans can effectively watch their team play. So obviously there's still no fans, which is really, really disappointing, but we kind of expected as well. But hopefully there'll be fans, touch wood, in the early stages of October after the international break. So there's no fans at the moment, so it allows obviously every team to watch their team live, if you like. So the Premier League have made a U-turn and made an agreement with all the other broadcasters. So like I said, Sky, BT, BBC and Amazon. So all 28 games that have to be played in September will now be televised on TV. So the breakdown of this is, just in terms of, sorry, I've made a slight error there. Rather than being 11 games televised, there was actually 17 games televised over the course of 3 weeks. There's actually 11 more games, guys, that have been added. So the 11 more games have been spread across the 4 broadcasters. Now BBC and Amazon have just got 1 game each. I couldn't tell you which ones they are at this stage, but they have been announced. BT have gained 3 more, and the Sky have gained 6 more. So they're your 11 games. So I think it's a sensible decision, especially as, like I just said, no fans in the stadium. They're not going to be able to watch their teams play. So yeah, it does make sense. And obviously when, again, touch wood, the fans are allowed into the stadiums, and they've, albeit it might only be 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 fans, at least there is going to be some fans that go there. And at that stage there, I'd imagine all fixtures won't be aired on TV in October. There might be maybe 1 week or maybe 2 maximum, just to sort of get into the swing of things in terms of the fans, and then after that I'd imagine it'll just be back to normal. Guys, that brings the end of sort of the final preview show on the Premier League Appetiser show. So we've made it to the 2021 season of the Premier League. We are absolutely excited. I can't wait for the games to kick off, albeit my team, Man United, aren't kicking off, but I'm still excited. There's football on. There's Premier League's back, and I'm just excited to see lots of teams. I mean, 2 teams in particular, maybe 3 teams. I'm excited to see Newcastle, Chelsea, and who's the other team I'd like to see? Oh, Arsenal. Arsenal, the 3 teams. Them 3 teams there, I'm quite excited to see. Going forward, they've made lots of transfers. They've made some good progressions from last season. So yeah, we've made it, guys. Again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so now. You'll get notifications come through. You get more content as the weeks go on. Again, if you haven't liked, leave a like, leave a comment. Opportunity to comment loads here, guys. Like I said about the Tom Kenny situation, you can, whoever his partner is, if it's 1 player or 2 players, leave a comment in the comment section. And then also, what do you think the predictions on some of the games will be? It might be like the Spurs-Everton game you want to make a prediction on, or it might be a completely different game as well. So that ends our episode, and we'll see everyone next week.